She had 3 minutes to live. The rope was cutting into her neck. 3 men stood watching. One raised his whip. Then a stranger appeared from the forest, a man 8 inches shorter than her, a man who hadn't spoken to another human in 7 years. He fired once. Everything changed. This is the story of how a mountain man saved a nun twice his size, married her 3 weeks later, and why that decision started a war that nearly killed them both. Montana Territory, September 1876. She had 3 minutes to live. The rope around her neck was cutting into flesh, drawing blood that ran in thin rivulets down pale skin. The woman's hands were bound behind her back, tied to the thick pine tree that kept her upright. Her black habit was torn at the shoulder, revealing scratches and bruises underneath. Her face, beautiful despite the terror etched across it, tilted upward as if searching the sky for salvation that wasn't coming. The man with the whip raised his arm again. This is the story of how a mountain man saved a nun twice his size and why that decision almost killed them both. Montana Territory, September 1876. 3 months after Custer fell at the Little Bighorn, when the land still ran red with anger and fear, the mountains didn't care about the wars of men. They stood eternal indifferent, watching as human dramas played out in their shadow like brief flickers of firelight against stone. Ezra Blackwood crouched beside Beaver Creek, his hands working the trap he'd set 2 days prior. Empty again. The beaver were getting smart, or he was getting slow. At 39 years old, 7 years alone in these mountains, maybe both were true. His reflection in the water showed a stranger. Lean face carved down to angles and shadows. Beard, thick and unkempt, streaked with gray that hadn't been there when Sarah was alive. Hair past his shoulders now tied back with a strip of leather. Eyes that had forgotten how to see people, only tracks and signs and threats. He straightened, listening. The forest had its own language if you knew how to hear it. Bird calls, wind through pine, the creek's constant murmur, and something else, a scream, human, female, distant but clear in the thin mountain air. Ezra's hand went to the rifle slung across his back. 7 years since he'd heard a human voice that wasn't his own. 7 years since he'd wanted to. But that scream, it bypassed thought, went straight to something deeper. Training from another life. Instinct older than civilization. He moved toward the sound. Through the pines, stepping soft despite his buckskin boots. Reading the ground as he went. Fresh tracks. 3 horses. Men wearing hard-soled boots, not moccasins. Moving fast, careless. They weren't hunters. Hunters moved quiet, respectful. These men moved like they owned the mountain and everything on it. The scream came again, closer now. Ezra slowed, approaching from downwind. 50 yards ahead, a clearing opened up where lightning had taken down an old growth pine last spring. 3 horses tied at the edge. 3 men standing in a half circle around something. Someone. He bellied down in the underbrush, watching. The woman was enormous. Even from this distance, even bound and on her knees, he could see she was taller than any of the men. 6 feet at least, maybe more. Shoulders broad as a man's under that torn black habit. Arms thick with muscle. The kind of woman who could work a farm or swing an axe, or apparently make 3 men nervous enough to tie her like a dangerous animal. The man with the whip was in his 40s, lean and hard, with a face that had forgotten kindness long ago. He wore a brown duster despite the warm afternoon, and underneath Ezra could see the telltale bulge of a pistol. "Last chance, sister." The man's voice carried across the clearing, flat and certain. "Where's the deed, the land papers your daddy left?" The woman's head came up. Even terrified, even bleeding, there was defiance in the set of her jaw. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Frank." The second man spoke up, younger, maybe 25. He had the look of someone who'd stumbled into deeper water than he'd meant to wade. "Maybe she really doesn't know. Maybe the old man never told her." "Shut up, Tommy." Frank didn't even look at him. He raised the whip again. "Your daddy was Jacob Thorne. He owned 500 acres in the valley and $3,000 in the bank. All of it goes to you if you claim it before your 28th birthday, which is—" he consulted a piece of paper from his pocket, 6 weeks from now. Now where are the papers? The third man, heavy-set and breathing hard, shifted his weight. Frank, we've been at this 2 hours. Sun's getting low. Maybe we should just finish her and search the body. That's the plan, Pete, but I want those papers first. Frank stepped closer to the woman. Last chance, sister. Tell me or I cut your throat and we find them ourselves. The woman's lips moved. Praying, Ezra realized. She was praying. Frank raised the whip. Ezra's rifle came up smooth and practiced. The distance was 80 yards, maybe 90. Slight downhill angle. Wind from the west at maybe 5 miles per hour. Pete was closest, standing with his back to Ezra, pistol loose in his holster. Tommy was to the left, nervous eyes darting. Frank was the leader of the threat, but he was partially blocked by the woman. Take Pete first. Eliminate one gun, then adjust. Ezra squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked across the clearing like a branch snapping. Pete spun, clutching his shoulder, and went down hard. His scream was high and childlike, shocking from a man that size. Frank whipped around, pistol clearing leather fast. Too fast. Trained. This wasn't his first fight. Ezra was already moving, rolling left, coming up behind a different tree. Tommy had his gun out but was pointing it everywhere and nowhere panicked. Frank's eyes scanned the tree line looking for the shooter. Show yourself. Frank's voice was steady despite the situation. You got 1 shot. Now I got 3. Ezra said nothing. Talking gave away position. Frank fired twice into the trees, blind shots meant to flush out or intimidate. The bullets went wide, thudding into pine trunks 20 feet from where Ezra crouched. Tommy, get to the horses. Pete, can you ride? Pete was still screaming, clutching his shoulder. Blood ran between his fingers, black in the fading light. It hurts, Frank. God, it hurts. Can you ride or not? I think so. I can try. Frank fired another shot, this one closer. The man had good instincts, was narrowing down Ezra's location by process of elimination. Another few seconds, and he'd have the angle. Ezra aimed carefully, not at Frank, but at the ground 3 feet to his left. Fired. Dirt and rocks exploded upward. Frank jerked back, and in that instant of distraction, Ezra stood, aimed properly, and fired again. The pistol flew from Frank's hand, struck by a bullet that missed his fingers by inches. Frank froze, looking at his empty hand, then at the tree line where smoke still drifted. Next one goes through your eye. Ezra's voice, unused for so long, came out rough as gravel. Leave. Now. Tommy was already running for the horses. Pete struggled to his feet, whimpering. Frank stood his ground a moment longer, and Ezra could see him calculating odds. 3 men, 2 guns left, 1 wounded. Against an unseen shooter who'd just demonstrated 2 perfect shots under pressure. This ain't over, Frank said finally. He backed toward the horses, never taking his eyes off the trees. You hear me? Victor wants her dead. She'll be dead. Keep talking and you'll beat her to it. Frank helped Pete onto a horse, swung up onto his own. Tommy was already mounted, white-faced, ready to bolt. Frank looked once more at the woman still tied to the tree, then at the forest where death waited. This ain't over, he said again. Then he spurred his horse and all 3 men crashed away through the brush, leaving silence behind. Ezra waited, counted to 60, listened for the sounds of retreat or ambush. When he was sure they were truly gone, he stepped into the clearing. The woman's head snapped up at the sound of his boots. Her eyes were dark, impossibly dark, and even now they held more suspicion than relief. She watched him approach like a deer watches a wolf. Not sure yet if this predator is better than the last. Ezra stopped 10 feet away. This close, she was even larger than he'd thought. Sitting down, her head came up to his chest. Standing, she'd tower over him. Her face was a mixture of bloodlines, the strong bones of the Shoshone, the pale skin of the Irish, beautiful in a way that made his throat tight. I'm going to cut you loose, he said. Don't run. You're hurt. She nodded, not speaking. He approached slowly, drew the knife from his belt. The rope around her neck was soaked with blood where it had cut in. He sliced through it carefully, and she gasped as pressure released. Her hands next bound so tight the leather had left deep grooves in her wrists. When the last binding fell away, she slumped forward, catching herself on hands and knees. "Breathe slow," Ezra said. "You're safe." She drew in air in ragged gulps, each one seeming to hurt. Her shoulders shook. Crying or shock, he couldn't tell. Then Pete's voice, weak but venomous. "You son of a bitch." Ezra spun. Pete had fallen from his horse 20 yards back, too weak to ride. Now he was on the ground, propped against a tree, and his good hand held his pistol, aimed at Ezra's back. The distance was too far. Ezra's rifle was up, but Pete was already squeezing the trigger. Time stretched. Ezra saw his own death in the black circle of that barrel. Then the woman moved. She was big, but God, she was fast. She launched herself upward and forward, putting her body between Ezra and the gun. The pistol cracked. The woman grunted. They both went down in a tangle of limbs and fabric. Ezra's rifle came up. He fired once. Pete's head snapped back and he was still. Silence. Absolute and terrible. Ezra scrambled to his feet, looked down. The woman was on her side, breathing hard. Blood spread across her left shoulder, soaking into the black fabric. "Why'd you do that?" The words came out harsher than he meant. "Why?" She looked up at him. Those dark eyes found his and held them. "You saved me. I couldn't let him kill you. You don't even know me." "I know enough." She tried to sit up, winced, fell back. "You came when I screamed. That's enough." Ezra knelt beside her, his hands hovering over the wound, unsure. He hadn't touched another person in 7 years. Hadn't wanted to. The thought of it made something twist in his chest. But she was bleeding, and that mattered more than his fears. "I need to see how bad it is," he said. She nodded. He peeled back the torn fabric of her habit. The bullet had gone through the meat of her shoulder, missing bone, exiting clean, painful but not fatal. He pulled off his neckerchief, wadded it against the wound. "Press here, hard as you can stand." She obeyed, her large hand covering his makeshift bandage. "Can you walk?" "I think so." "We need to go, now. Those men might come back with friends. My cabin is 3 miles north. Can you make 3 miles? She looked at him, really looked, taking in his size, a full 8 inches shorter than her, his weathered face, his strange eyes. And something in her expression shifted, recognition maybe, or resignation. "I'll make it," she said. He helped her to her feet. Standing, she was taller than he'd guessed, 6'2" at least. She swayed, caught herself, straightened. Even wounded and terrified, she held herself with a dignity that made his chest ache. "I'm Ezra," he said. "Ezra Blackwood. Sister Abigail, Abigail Thorne." Thorne, the name Frank had used. "Your daddy was Jacob Thorne." "We'll talk when we're safe," Ezra said. He retrieved his rifle, checked Pete's body. The man was dead, eyes staring at nothing. Ezra had killed men before, during the war, during the early days out here, when outlaws thought a lone trapper was easy prey. It never got easier. The weight of it never lightened. He took Pete's gun, his ammunition, what little food he had in his saddlebags. Waste was a sin in the mountains. The dead had no use for such things. "This way." He started north, setting a pace he hoped she could match. Behind him he heard her first few steps. Unsteady but determined. He didn't look back. Looking back was how you missed what was ahead. And ahead in these mountains, death waited as patient as stone. They walked in silence for the first mile. The forest closed around them, familiar and safe to Ezra, foreign and threatening to the woman who followed. He could hear her breathing, labored but steady, the rustle of her habit against brush, the occasional small sound of pain when the wound pulled wrong. At a creek crossing he stopped, knelt, drank, filled his canteen. She did the same, moving stiff, favoring the injured shoulder. "Who were they?" Ezra asked. "I don't know." She wiped water from her mouth with the back of her hand. "I was traveling from St. Catherine's Convent in Wyoming to visit a sick family in Helena. The wagon was ambushed 6 miles back. They killed the driver, an old man named Henry who'd done nothing but be kind. They wanted papers, a deed." She looked away. "My father died last year. I hadn't seen him in 13 years. Not since I entered the convent. I didn't know he'd left me anything. $3,000 and 500 acres is a lot of anything. I don't want it. I don't want any of it. Her voice was fierce. Money is what killed my mother. My father's drinking and debts. I went to the convent to escape all that. Ezra studied her. The set of her jaw. The way her hands clenched. She was telling the truth, or believed she was. Well, someone wants you dead for it. That man Frank, he said a name. Victor. Her head snapped up. Victor. You know him. Victor Thorne. My uncle. My father's older brother. She stood abruptly swayed, caught herself against a tree. He's the one who tried to marry me off when I was 14, sold me like livestock to pay his debts. That's why I ran. The pieces were fitting together now. A family, land, money, greed, the oldest story in the world. Your uncle wants you dead so he can claim the inheritance, Ezra said. Apparently. She laughed, bitter and broken. I've been hiding in a convent for 13 years, and it still wasn't far enough. Something fell from her pocket when she'd stood. A piece of paper folded small. Ezra picked it up, opened it. The handwriting was crude but clear. Victor Thorne, 500 per head. Dead, not alive. He showed it to her, watched the color drain from her face. $500, she whispered. I'm worth $500 dead. To them, not to God. He folded the paper, tucked it in his own pocket. Come on, we're almost there. The last 2 miles were harder. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of blood and fire. Shadows grew long and strange. Abigail was limping now, her breathing ragged. Twice she stumbled. The second time Ezra caught her arm to steady her. The contact shocked them both. Her skin was warm through the thin fabric. Alive. Real. He let go quickly, stepped back. Sorry, he muttered. It's all right. But her voice was strange. They walked on. The cabin appeared as the last light was dying. Small, rough-built from pine logs, chinked with mud and moss. A single window covered with oiled paper. A chimney of stacked stone. The door was thick oak, barred from inside with an iron bolt he'd forged himself. Home. For 7 years his only home. It's not much, Ezra said. It's shelter. That's more than I had an hour ago. He lifted the latch, pushed the door open. Inside was darkness and the smell of old smoke and cured meat. He lit a candle, and weak light pushed back the shadows. One room. A narrow bed in the corner, just a frame with rope webbing and a straw mattress. A table and 2 chairs, though one chair hadn't been sat in for 7 years. A stone fireplace. Shelves holding tin plates, cups, a few books. Traps and tools hanging on pegs. And on the wall opposite the bed, a tin-type photograph in a simple frame. A woman. Young, maybe 25. Pretty in a soft way with light hair and gentle eyes. She was smiling at something beyond the camera's view. Abigail saw it, glanced at Ezra, looked away. Sit, he said, pointing to the good chair. I need to look at that wound properly. She sat, moving carefully. The chair creaked under her weight. She was too tall for it, her knees nearly to her chest, and something like shame crossed her face. Ezra pretended not to notice. He built up the fire-set water to boil. From a shelf he took clean cloth needle and thread, a bottle of whiskey. His hands shook as he laid out the supplies. This close to her in the small space of the cabin, he could hear every breath she took, could smell pine and blood, and something underneath, something human and female and terrifying. This is going to hurt, he said. I know. He helped her out of the torn habit top, trying not to look at anything except the wound. But it was impossible not to see. The breadth of her shoulders, the strength in her arms, the way muscle moved under skin. She was built like a warrior, like the Shoshone women he'd seen long ago who could ride all day and fight all night. The wound was angry red but clean. The bullet had gone straight through. You're lucky, he said. Another inch to the right and it would have hit the bone. Another inch down and it would have nicked the lung. God was watching over me. He looked at her then. Really looked. At her face composed despite the pain, at her eyes clear and certain even now. "You really believe that?" "I do." She met his gaze without flinching. "Don't you?" Ezra turned back to the wound, threaded the needle. "I did once, long time ago." He worked in silence, stitching the entry wound first, then the exit. She didn't make a sound, though he felt her muscles tense with each pass of the needle. When he was done, he wrapped it tight with clean linen. "Drink this." He handed her the whiskey. She took a swallow, coughed. "I haven't had whiskey since I was 12. It'll help with the pain and infection." She took another drink, handed the bottle back. Their fingers brushed. She pulled back as if burned. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I'm not used to. I mean, in the convent, we don't." "I understand." And he did. Whatever discomfort he felt, she felt worse. A woman who'd hidden from the world for 13 years suddenly thrust into a tiny cabin with a strange man. He saw the way she held herself. Careful, guarded, ashamed. "Take the bed," he said. "I'll sleep on the floor." "I can't take your bed." "You're wounded. You need rest." His tone left no room for argument. She stood, moved toward the bed, paused. "The woman in the picture, was she your wife?" Ezra's jaw tightened. "Yes." "What happened to her?" "She died." The silence stretched. Abigail seemed to understand that was all the answer she'd get. She lay down on the bed, too tall for it, her feet hanging off the end. She turned to face the wall. "Thank you," she said softly, "for saving my life." "You saved mine, too. We're even." Outside, full darkness had fallen. Ezra banked the fire, checked the bar on the door, blew out the candle. He lay down on the floor near the hearth, his rifle within reach. The floorboards were hard against his back. He'd slept on worse. In the darkness, he could hear Abigail breathing. Slow and steady, the breath of someone who'd learned to find calm in chaos. It was the first time in 7 years he'd fallen asleep to the sound of another person breathing. He didn't know if that made him feel better or worse. Sometime deep in the night, he woke to the sound of horses. His eyes snapped open. He was on his feet, rifle in hand, before his mind fully caught up to his body. The sound came again. Multiple horses, moving slow, trying for quiet but not succeeding. Men who knew how to ride but not how to hunt. Ezra moved to the window, peered through a gap in the oiled paper. Moonlight painted the clearing silver. 3 shapes on horseback, maybe 40 yards out. Frank's voice carried clear in the night air. "Blackwood, we know you're in there. Send out the nun." Behind him, Ezra heard Abigail sit up. "How do they know my name?" he whispered. That was the question, wasn't it? He'd been alone for 7 years. Anonymous, unknown. And yet Frank had called him by name. "Blackwood," Frank called again. "You got something that don't belong to you. Give her up and you can live." Ezra checked his ammunition. 6 rounds in the rifle. Pete's pistol had 4. Not enough for a sustained fight, but enough to make them think twice. "What do we do?" Abigail's voice was steady, but he could hear the fear underneath. "We wait. They can't get in unless they want to come through the door one at a time, and they're not that stupid." A gunshot cracked. The window exploded, inward glass and paper shredding. Abigail dropped flat. Ezra stayed low, moved to the side of the window. "That was a warning," Frank shouted. "Next one goes through the door." Another shot. The heavy oak door shuddered but held. Ezra returned fire, aiming high, not trying to hit, but to establish cost. The night erupted in muzzle flashes. Bullets punched through the cabin walls, 1, 2, 3. The logs were thick, but not thick enough. Wood splinters flew. Abigail crawled across the floor to where Ezra crouched. "We can't stay here. They'll just keep shooting until they hit one of us." She was right. The cabin was a trap now, not a shelter. "There's a back window," Ezra said. "Small, but you might fit." "Might? We'll make you fit." Another volley of shots. One bullet passed so close to Ezra's head he felt the wind of it. They were getting the range now, adjusting their aim. "Go," he said. "Now." Abigail crawled toward the back of the cabin. Ezra fired twice more, keeping their attention on the front. He heard the scrape of the window opening, a muffled curse, and then silence. "I'm stuck." Abigail's voice came from the darkness. Of course she was. The window was built for a man his size, not a woman built like a warrior. Ezra moved back, keeping low. She was wedged in the window frame halfway through, unable to move forward or back. "Don't," she said. "Don't what?" "Don't laugh." God help him, he wanted to. The absurdity of it, this giant woman stuck in a window while men tried to kill them both. But her voice held such mortification, such shame, that the urge died. "Push," he said. "I'll help from this side." He braced his hands against her back, pushed. She pushed from the other side. The window frame creaked, groaned, and then with a sound like a tree branch snapping, she popped through. He heard her land hard on the other side. Another bullet came through the front wall, this one close enough that splinters stung his cheek. Ezra grabbed his rifle, squeezed through the window after her. It was tight, even for him. On the other side, Abigail was on her hands and knees, breathing hard. "Can you run?" he asked. "Yes." "Then run." They ran. Into the forest, away from the cabin, into darkness so complete Ezra could barely see 3 feet ahead. But he knew these woods. Every tree, every stone, every game trail. He'd walked them for 7 years in all seasons, all weathers. They were his home more than any building. Behind them, Frank's voice rose in anger as he realized they'd escaped. Find them. They can't have gone far. But they could, and did. Ezra led Abigail east, then north, then west, doubling back and crossing their own trail to confuse pursuit. Through a creek to kill the scent, up a rocky slope that left no tracks, into a hollow where an old lightning-struck pine had fallen and left a gap beneath its massive trunk. "In here," Ezra whispered. They crawled under the log into a space barely large enough for 2. So close he could feel the heat of her body, hear every breath. So close that 7 years of solitude pressed against him like a physical weight. They waited, listening. Voices in the distance, horses moving through brush. The sounds grew closer, then farther, then faded entirely. Still they waited. An hour passed, maybe 2. The moon moved across the sky. Gradually the night sounds returned. Owls, small creatures rustling in undergrowth. The forest accepting their presence again. "Are they gone?" Abigail whispered. "For now." "Will they come back?" "Yes." Ezra shifted, trying to find a comfortable position in the cramped space. "Your uncle wants you dead. He's not going to stop because we ran away." "Then what do we do?" That was the question. Ezra had been asking himself the same thing. His cabin was compromised. They knew where he lived, knew his name somehow. Staying was death. But where could they go higher, he said. Up into the high country. There's places up there even the Shoshone don't go. We can hide out until winter. By then maybe your uncle will think you're dead. Maybe he'll give up. And if he doesn't... Ezra didn't have an answer for that. They emerged from hiding as the first gray light of dawn filtered through the trees. Abigail was shivering, her shoulders stiff with dried blood. Ezra's back ached from the cramped position. They both looked like they'd been dragged behind a horse. "We need supplies," Ezra said. "Food, ammunition, blankets. All of that's back at the cabin." "Can we risk it?" "We have to. We won't last 3 days in the high country without proper gear." They approached the cabin, carefully circling wide, watching for ambush. The clearing was empty. The door hung open, kicked off its hinges. Inside, the place had been ransacked. Table overturned, shelves swept clean. His few possessions scattered and broken. But they'd missed the important things. The cash he'd buried beneath the floorboards. Dried meat flour, coffee powder, and shot. He'd learned long ago to hide what mattered. While he dug up supplies, Abigail stood watch at the window. She'd found a coat of his, far too small, and wore it anyway. It made her look even larger, more out of place. "Ezra," she said softly. He looked up. "The picture of your wife. It's gone." He looked at the wall. The nail was there, but the frame was missing. They'd taken it. Why to taunt him? to prove they'd been here. It didn't matter. The picture was gone, and Sarah's face would fade a little more from his memory. "Doesn't matter," he said, but his voice was rough. "I'm sorry. Not your fault." He went back to loading supplies into a pack. "None of this is your fault." "Feels like it is." He stood, looked at her, really looked. At this woman who'd appeared in his life like a thunderstorm, sudden and violent and impossible to ignore. She was too big, too strong, too different to ever fit in the world she'd been born into. No wonder she'd hidden in a convent. No wonder she looked at him with such desperate hope and such terrible fear. "Listen to me," he said. "What your uncle is doing, that's on him, not you. You didn't ask to be born. You didn't ask for that inheritance. You're just trying to survive. Nothing shameful in that." Her eyes went bright with tears. "Do you really believe that?" "I do." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, a gesture so vulnerable it made his chest ache. "Thank you." He turned away uncomfortable with her gratitude, with the way it made him feel. Responsible, connected, alive. "We should go," he said. "Sun's up. They might come back." They left the cabin behind. Ezra took one last look at the place that had been his home, his prison, his refuge. 7 years of his life contained in those 4 walls. Now abandoned, violated, meaningless. He turned his back on it and walked into the forest. Abigail followed. They walked north and east, climbing steadily. The terrain grew rougher, the trees thinner. By midday, they'd reached the high meadows where wildflowers still bloomed in defiant beauty despite the approaching autumn. By evening, they'd climbed above the tree line into a landscape of stone and sky and wind. They made camp in a sheltered hollow. No fire too dangerous. They ate dried meat and drank water from a spring so cold it made their teeth ache. As darkness fell, they huddled together under a single blanket, sharing warmth because the alternative was freezing. "Tell me about your wife," Abigail said suddenly. Ezra stiffened. "Why?" "Because she's part of why you're here, alone, and I want to understand." He was silent so long she probably thought he wouldn't answer. But something in him, some locked door creaked open just a crack. "Her name was Sarah. I met her when I was 25 working as a blacksmith in a town called Silver Creek. She was the teacher's daughter. Pretty, kind. Too good for me, everyone said, but she didn't care. We married a year later." He stopped, swallowed. "We were happy. 1 year. Just 1 year of being happy. Then she got pregnant. Everything seemed fine. The midwife said the baby was healthy. Sarah was healthy. And then—" The words stuck in his throat like broken glass. "Labor went on too long. Something was wrong. The baby was turned wrong or stuck or I don't know. There was so much blood. The midwife couldn't stop it. Sarah kept saying she was cold, getting colder. I held her hand, and I felt the life go out of her. Felt it. And I couldn't do anything. Couldn't save her. Couldn't save my son. Both of them gone, and me still here." Silence. Just the wind moving across stone. "I buried them behind the cabin, under a pine tree Sarah loved, and then I couldn't stay. Couldn't look at the people who pitied me or blamed me or tried to comfort me. So I left. Came up here. Been here ever since." Abigail's hand found his in the darkness, squeezed gently. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm so sorry." "Not your fault either. I know, but I'm still sorry it happened." They sat like that, hands clasped, 2 broken people holding on to each other in the dark. "My mother died when I was 11, Abigail said. "They said it was fever, but I saw the bruises. I knew what my father did to her when he drank. He killed her just as sure as if he'd put a gun to her head, and then he tried to sell me to pay his debts. 14 years old, and he was going to marry me off to a man 3 times my age." Her voice was steady, but Ezra could hear the old pain underneath. "I ran, walked for 2 days, found St. Catherine's Convent, Sister Margaret. She was the one who opened the door. She took one look at me, bruised and scared, and too tall and too dark to fit anywhere, and she said, "God's been waiting for you, child. Come in." 13 years I stayed, learning to read and write, learning to pray, learning to be still and quiet and small even though I'm none of those things. And I thought, this is my life now, this is where I belong, and it was better than where I'd been. But it wasn't home, Ezra said. No, it was never home. I was always too much, too big for the beds, too strong for the work they gave me, too different. Sister Margaret tried to make me feel welcome, but I saw how the others looked at me, like I was a mistake God made, too much woman, too much Indian, too much. Her hand tightened on his. And then you looked at me, and you didn't look away, didn't flinch, didn't tell me to be smaller or quieter or less. You saw me. Ezra didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know how to explain that he saw her because he was broken too. That broken things recognize each other. "We should sleep," he said instead. "Long climb tomorrow." But neither of them let go of the other's hand. They slept poorly, waking every few hours to the sounds of the mountain. Once, a pack of wolves howled in the distance. Once something large moved through the hollow below. Each time Ezra's hand went to his rifle. Each time Abigail pressed closer. When dawn came gray and cold, they rose stiff and sore. Ezra's back ached. Abigail's shoulder was swollen, the bandage stained with fresh blood. "We need to change that," Ezra said, pointing to her shoulder. She nodded, too tired to argue. He unwrapped the old bandage, examined the wound. It was healing, but slowly. The stitches held, but the skin around them was red and hot to the touch. "Might be infected," he said. "What do we do?" "Keep it clean. Watch it. If it gets worse, we'll have to deal with it then." He rewrapped it with clean cloth, his hands gentler than they needed to be. She watched his face as he worked, and he felt the weight of her gaze like sunlight. "You're good at this," she said. "Taking care of people." Had practice. Sarah was always cutting herself in the garden. The name hung between them. Sarah, the ghost he carried. They ate a cold breakfast and started climbing again, higher and higher into country that didn't welcome humans. The air grew thin. Each breath took effort. Abigail struggled with the altitude, her face gray breathing labored. "We can rest," Ezra said. "No, keep going. They might still be following." She was right. So they climbed. By noon they'd reached a plateau, a flat expanse of stone and scrub with a view that stretched 50 miles in every direction. To the south, Ezra could see smoke rising, multiple campfires, a hunting party or a search party. "They're still looking," Abigail said. "Yes. How long will they keep looking? Until they find us or give up. Your uncle paid $500 for your death. Men have killed for less." She sat down heavily on a rock. "I don't understand. I never wanted the money. I never wanted any of it. If I could give it to him, I would. It's not about the money anymore. It's about witnesses. We saw his men. We can testify. As long as we're alive, he's at risk. So we run forever." Ezra looked at her, at this woman who'd done nothing wrong except be born to the wrong family, who'd tried to hide from the world and had the world come after her anyway. "No," he said. "We survive until winter. Then we figure out what comes next. And if they find us before winter." He didn't answer. The answer was death, and they both knew it. They walked on. The cave Ezra found on the third day wasn't much, but it was shelter. A split in the mountainside hidden behind a curtain of scrub pine deep enough to stand in, wide enough for two. The floor was dry stone, the ceiling high enough that even Abigail could stand upright without stooping. "We'll stay here," Ezra said, dropping his pack, "at least until we figure out our next move." Abigail sank down against the cave wall, exhausted. 3 days of climbing had drained her. The wound in her shoulder throbbed with every heartbeat. Her legs shook with fatigue. But she was alive. They both were. Ezra set about making the cave livable. He gathered deadfall for a fire, careful to choose wood that would burn with minimal smoke, built a fire ring from stones, hung his traps near the entrance to warn of approaching animals or men, spread his bedroll in the driest corner. "Only one blanket," he said, not looking at her. "We'll have to share again." "I know." The words hung between them heavy with implications neither wanted to examine. That night, as they huddled together for warmth, Abigail spoke into the darkness. "Can I ask you something?" "Yes." "The rings you wear, around your neck. I've seen you touch them when you think I'm not looking." Ezra's hand went automatically to the leather cord to the 2 gold bands that hung there, his and Sarah's. 7 years he'd worn them, 7 years of carrying her memory against his skin. "Wedding rings," he said. "Mine and my wife's." "You wear them both?" "Yes." "Why?" He didn't answer immediately. The question cut deeper than she knew. Why did he wear them to remember to punish himself, to keep the world at bay? "Because I can't let go," he said finally. "I know she's gone. I know she's been gone 7 years. But if I take them off, if I let her go, then it's like she never existed. Like that year we had together meant nothing. And I can't make it mean nothing." Abigail was quiet for a long moment. Then, "That's not a sin, Ezra, to still love someone who died. Feels like one sometimes. Like I'm supposed to move on, let go, keep living. But I don't know how." Her hand found his in the darkness. The gesture was becoming familiar, comforting. "Maybe you're not supposed to let go completely," she said. "Maybe you're just supposed to make room for what comes next." He didn't know how to respond to that, didn't know if he believed it. So he said nothing, just held her hand and listened to the wind howl across the mountain. The 4th day, Ezra taught Abigail how to set snares. They needed food, and his supplies wouldn't last forever. She learned quickly, her large hands surprisingly deft with the thin wire and delicate triggers. "Like this." She held up a completed snare. "Exactly like that. You're a natural." She smiled, and the expression transformed her face, made her look younger, less burdened, beautiful in a way that made his throat tight. They set the snares along a game trail, spacing them carefully. As they worked, Ezra found himself watching her, the way she moved economical and sure, the way her dark hair caught the light, the way she bit her lower lip when concentrating. He forced himself to look away. That evening, one of the snares yielded a rabbit. Ezra showed Abigail how to skin and gut it, how to save the hide for tanning, how to use every part. She watched intently, not squeamish, just focused. "You're good at this," she said as he worked. "Teaching, I mean." "Had to learn it all myself, trial and error, lot of error in the early days." "Is that how you learned to shoot, trial and error?" "No, that was the war, 1861 to 65. I was barely 20 when it started. Came back different, came back knowing how to kill." He spitted the rabbit, set it over the fire to roast. The smell made his mouth water. Fresh meat after days of dried provisions. "I don't like killing," he said quietly. "Never have. But I'm good at it. And up here being good at it is the difference between living and dying. You killed Pete to save me." "Yes." "Do you regret it?" Ezra looked at her. At this woman who'd thrown herself in front of a bullet meant for him, who'd saved his life the same day he'd saved hers. "No," he said. "I don't regret it." They ate in comfortable silence, tearing the meat with their hands, savoring every bite. When they were done, Abigail licked her fingers and sighed. "That's the best meal I've had in 13 years. Ezra laughed, surprised by the sound coming from his own throat. "Really better than convent food." "Convent food is porridge and bread and vegetables boiled until they surrender. This is real. It's just rabbit. It's more than that. It's freedom." The word hung in the air between them. Freedom. Was that what this was? Running for their lives, hiding in a cave, hunted by men who wanted them dead. But looking at her face flushed with firelight and satisfaction, he thought maybe she was right. Maybe freedom wasn't about being safe. Maybe it was about being yourself, finally without walls or rules or shame. The 5th day brought trouble. Ezra was checking the snares when he found the tracks, fresh, less than an hour old. 3 horses moving slow, searching. They'd passed within a quarter-mile of the cave. He hurried back, his heart pounding. Abigail was sitting at the cave entrance mending a tear in her habit with a needle and thread from his kit. "They're close," he said without preamble. "We need to move. Now." She didn't argue, didn't ask questions, just stood, gathered what little she'd unpacked, and waited. Ezra made a decision. "Higher. There's a place I know. Old hunting camp the Shoshone used before the wars. No one goes there anymore. If we can reach it, we'll be safe." "How far?" 8 miles. Rough terrain. Can you make it?" She looked at her shoulder, still bandaged, still healing, looked back at him. "I'll make it." They left everything they couldn't carry, the extra blanket, half their food, things that would slow them down. Ezra scattered the ashes of their fire, brushed away footprints, did what he could to erase evidence of their presence. Then they ran. 8 miles doesn't sound like much. On flat ground, a good walker can cover it in 3 hours. But this wasn't flat ground. This was mountain terrain, steep and treacherous, littered with loose scree and hidden drops. And they weren't walking. They were running, driven by fear and desperation. Abigail's face went gray after the first mile. After 2, she was gasping for breath. After 3, she stumbled. Ezra caught her arm. "We can rest." "No, keep going." "You're hurt." "I said keep going." Her voice was fierce, brooking no argument. So they kept going. Behind them, distant but growing closer, they heard voices, men calling to each other, the sounds of a search party spreading out, covering ground. "They're gaining," Abigail panted. "I know. Stay close." Ezra led them off the main trail into dense brush that tore at their clothes and skin, through a stream to break their scent, up a rocky slope that left no tracks. Every trick he knew, every skill he'd learned in 7 years of solitude, he used now. But the voices kept coming. At the top of a ridge, Ezra paused, breathing hard, looked back, saw them. 3 riders, maybe half a mile back. One of them was Frank. Even at this distance, Ezra recognized the brown duster, the purposeful way he sat his horse. "He's not giving up," Abigail said. "No, he's not." "We can't outrun horses." "No, but we can go where horses can't." He pointed ahead. A sheer rock face, maybe 50 feet high, vertical with only narrow ledges and small handholds, impossible for horses, difficult even for men. "We have to climb that." Abigail's voice was small. "Yes. I've never climbed anything in my life." "You're strong. You can do this. Just follow me. Step where I step. Hold what I hold." He started up without waiting for her agreement. The rock was rough under his hands, solid. He'd climbed this face before years ago when he was exploring the high country. Knew which holds were solid, which would crumble. Below, he heard Abigail start to climb. Heard her ragged breathing, the scrape of her boots on stone. "Don't look down," he called. "Just look at the rock in front of you." A gunshot cracked. The bullet struck stone 2 feet from Ezra's hand, spraying rock chips. He looked down. Frank and his men had reached the base of the cliff. They couldn't follow, but they could shoot. "Climb faster," Ezra said. Another shot, this one closer. Frank was getting the range. Ezra pulled himself over a ledge, reached down. "Give me your hand." Abigail stretched up. Their fingers touched, clasped. He pulled. She pushed. For a moment she was suspended between earth and sky, held only by his grip on her wrist. Then she was up, collapsing on the ledge beside him. No time to rest. Ezra pulled her to her feet, and they kept climbing. Below, Frank's voice rose in frustration. "You can't run forever, Blackwood. We'll wait you out. You have to come down eventually." But they didn't come down. They went up, higher and higher, until the men below were small as ants, until Frank gave up shooting, the distance too great, until the voices faded entirely. At the top they collapsed. Abigail's hands were bleeding from rough rock. Ezra's arms shook with exhaustion. But they'd made it. "Is this it?" Abigail asked when she could breathe again. "The hunting camp. Number. That's still 4 miles north. But they can't follow us this way. We bought ourselves time." "How much time?" "Enough. I hope." They rested for an hour, then moved on. The terrain here was different, flatter, more open, sparse vegetation, mostly rock and lichen, and cold. So cold the wind cut through their clothes like knives. "I'm freezing," Abigail said, her teeth chattering. Ezra took off his coat, draped it over her shoulders. It was far too small, barely covered her back, but it was something. "You'll freeze," she protested. "I've been cold before. I'll manage." They walked on, leaning into the wind. The hunting camp appeared at dusk, a shallow cave larger than the one they'd left, with the remains of old fires and crude drawings on the walls. Animals and hunters and spirits rendered in ochre and charcoal by hands long dead. "Shoshone?" Abigail asked, touching one of the drawings gently. "Yes, my wife was half Shoshone. She told me about places like this, sacred places where the people came to hunt and pray and connect with what came before. She would have liked knowing you brought me here." Ezra looked at her surprised. "Why do you say that?" "Because I'm half Shoshone too, and because she loved you. Anyone who loved you would want you to keep living." The words hit him harder than he expected. He turned away, busied himself with building a fire. That night they ate the last of the dried meat and drank water melted from snow. The fire pushed back the darkness, but not the cold. They huddled together under Ezra's coat, shivering. "Tell me something," Abigail said. "Something true." "What do you mean?" "Something you've never told anyone. A secret." Ezra was quiet for a long time. Then, "Sometimes I forget what Sarah looked like. I try to remember her face and I can't. It's been 7 years and she's fading, and that terrifies me more than dying." Abigail's arms tightened around him. "You want to know a secret?" "Yes." "I was glad when they came for me, the men who tried to kill me. Not glad they wanted me dead, but glad someone knew I existed. 13 years in that convent, and I felt invisible. Too big to ignore, but too different to acknowledge, like I was a ghost haunting my own life. And when Frank grabbed me when he said my name, I thought finally, someone sees me, even if it's someone who wants me dead." Ezra turned to look at her. The firelight painted her face in amber and shadow. Beautiful. God, she was beautiful. "I see you," he said. "I've seen you from the beginning. I know. That's why this is so hard." "What's hard?" "Being this close to you, wanting, knowing I can't." His heart was pounding. "Can't what?" "Can't want you the way I do. I took vows, Ezra. I devoted myself to God." "You said they were temporary vows, that you never took final vows." "They were still vows. They still meant something." "Did they mean more than this?" He gestured between them. "More than what we have right here." She pulled away, stood up, paced to the cave entrance. Her back was to him, her shoulders rigid. "I don't know," she said finally. "I don't know what this is. I don't know what I'm allowed to feel. I've spent 13 years learning to be small and quiet and invisible, learning to deny everything I am, and now you're asking me to. To what? Throw it all away." Ezra walked to her, slowly giving her time to move away if she wanted. She didn't move. "I'm not asking you to throw anything away," he said quietly. "I'm asking you to choose, maybe for the first time in your life, not what your father wanted, not what the church wanted, what you want." "I don't know what I want." "Yes, you do. You're just afraid to say it." She turned then, and her eyes were bright with tears. "You're right. I am afraid. Because what I want is impossible. I want to be normal, to be small enough to fit, to be the kind of woman men don't look away from, to be loved not despite what I am but because of it. And that's not going to happen, not for someone like me." Ezra reached up, placed his hand on her cheek. She had to lean down for him to reach, and the gesture made his chest ache. "You're wrong," he said. "You're not too much. You're not wrong. You're perfect exactly as you are. God made you big and strong and beautiful for a reason. Maybe this reason. Maybe you were made to survive this. To survive what's coming. What if I don't want to just survive? What if I want to live? Then live. The space between them crackled with tension. Abigail's breathing quickened. Ezra could feel his own pulse in his throat. "I don't know how," she whispered. "Neither do I. We'll figure it out together." He stood on his toes. She leaned down. Their lips met. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative. Two people who'd forgotten how to touch learning again, then deeper, hungrier. 7 years of loneliness pouring out of Ezra, 13 years of denial breaking in Abigail. When they pulled apart, both were breathing hard. "We shouldn't," Abigail said, but she didn't move away. "I know. This is wrong." "Is it?" She looked at him, really looked, at this small, weathered man who'd saved her life, who'd run with her into the wilderness, who looked at her like she was something precious instead of something broken. "No," she said. "It's not wrong. It's the first thing that's felt right in 13 years. They kissed again. The 6th day dawned cold and clear. Ezra woke first as always. Abigail was curled against him, her head on his chest, still sleeping. In sleep, the tension left her face. She looked younger, peaceful. He didn't want to wake her, didn't want to break this moment. But the sun was up and they needed food, and staying in one place too long was dangerous. He eased out from under her, careful not to wake her, picked up his rifle, headed out to check for game. The mountain was quiet. No birds sang. No small creatures rustled in the brush, the kind of quiet that preceded danger. Ezra's instincts screamed at him. Something was wrong. He turned to head back to the cave. That's when he heard it. A sound like distant thunder, but wrong. Not from the sky, from the mountain itself. He looked up. A wall of white was racing down the slope. Avalanche, triggered by the morning sun warming yesterday's snowfall. Not huge, not the kind that could bury a town, but big enough, fast enough, coming straight for the cave where Abigail slept. Ezra ran, faster than he'd ever run, screaming her name. "Abigail, get out now." He saw her emerge from the cave, confused, still half asleep. Saw the moment she spotted the avalanche, saw her freeze in terror. "Run!" He was still 50 yards away, too far. "Run!" She ran, toward him away from the cave, but the avalanche was faster. It hit her like a physical blow. Snow and ice and rock tumbling, roaring. She went down, disappeared under white. "No!" Ezra's scream tore from his throat. "No!" The avalanche swept past him close enough to spray his face with ice. Then it was gone, rushing down the mountain, leaving devastation behind. Silence. Ezra scrambled over the debris. Snow 3 feet deep in places. Rocks the size of his head. And somewhere underneath Abigail. "Abigail!" He dug with his hands frantically. "Abigail, where are you?" A sound. Faint. A moan. He followed it. There. A hand protruding from the snow. He grabbed it, pulled, dug with his other hand, clearing snow from her face. She gasped, coughed, sucked in air. Alive. Thank God, alive. "Can you move?" Ezra asked, still digging. "I think. My leg. Something's on my leg." He dug faster. Found the problem. A boulder, maybe 200 pounds, pinned across her shin. He tried to lift it. Couldn't. Not enough leverage. "I'm going to find something to pry it off. Don't move." Not planning to. He found a thick branch in the debris, wedged it under the boulder. Pushed. The rock shifted slightly. Pushed harder. His muscles screamed. The branch creaked, threatened to snap. "Come on," he grunted. "Come on." The boulder moved, inch by inch. Finally enough that Abigail could pull her leg free. She cried out in pain, but she was free. Ezra dropped the branch, knelt beside her. Her leg was swelling already, bruised dark purple. "Can you stand?" "I can try." He helped her up. She put weight on the leg, whimpered, nearly fell. He caught her. "It's not broken," she said through gritted teeth, "just badly bruised." "Can you walk?" "Not fast, not far." That's when they heard the voices. Frank's voice, closer than it should be. "Did you hear that? Sounded like an avalanche. North side." Another voice, one of his men. Think it got them? Only one way to find out. Let's go. Ezra looked at Abigail. She was in no condition to run. Her leg could barely support her weight, but staying meant death. We have to go, he said. Now. She nodded, her face pale with pain. He got his shoulder under her arm, took most of her weight. Together they stumbled away from the avalanche site, heading east away from the voices. They didn't get far, maybe half a mile. Abigail was trying, but each step sent pain shooting through her leg. She was slowing them down, and they both knew it. "Leave me," she said finally. "No. Ezra, you can't carry me. I'm too big, too heavy. Save yourself." I said no. Why won't you leave me?" He stopped, looked at her. At this woman who'd become everything in the space of 6 days, who'd made him feel alive for the first time in 7 years. "Because I can't," he said simply. "I can't lose you. Not you." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Ezra." He kissed her, hard and desperate and full of everything he couldn't say. When he pulled back, her eyes were wide. "You love me." "Yes." "That's impossible." And yet here we are. A gunshot cracked close enough that they heard the bullet whine past. They both dropped Ezra, covering Abigail with his body. Frank emerged from the trees, pistol raised. Behind him, the other man rifle at the ready. They'd been flanked. "Well, well," Frank said. "Look what the avalanche didn't kill." Ezra's rifle was slung across his back. No way to reach it before Frank could fire. Pete's pistol was in his belt, but same problem. They were caught. "It's over, Blackwood. Give up the nun and I'll let you walk away." "No deal." "Then you both die here." Frank cocked the pistol. "Your choice." Ezra stood slowly, hands raised, positioning himself between Frank and Abigail. If one of them was going to die, it would be him. "Move," Frank said. "Let me see her." "No." "I said move. Make me." Frank's finger tightened on the trigger. This was it. This was how it ended. Ezra had time for one thought. "I'm sorry, Sarah. I'm sorry I couldn't protect her either." Then a gunshot rang out, but not from Frank's pistol. Frank's other man dropped, clutching his thigh. Blood poured between his fingers. Everyone froze. From the trees emerged a young man. Tommy, the one who'd run at the first rescue. He held a rifle, still smoking. "No more Frank," Tommy said. His voice shook, but his hands were steady. "I'm done. No more killing." Frank turned slowly. "Tommy, what are you doing?" "What I should have done from the start. Walking away." "Victor will kill you. He'll kill your family." "Maybe. But I'll die knowing I didn't murder an innocent woman. That's got to count for something." Frank's eyes went cold. "You're a dead man." "Maybe. But so are you if you don't lower that gun." The standoff held for 5 seconds that felt like hours. Then Frank lowered his pistol. "This isn't over," he said to Ezra. "Victor wants her dead. He'll send more men. You can't protect her forever. Watch me." Frank looked at his wounded companion, at Tommy, at Ezra and Abigail. Then he turned and walked away. Just walked, leaving his man bleeding on the ground. Tommy waited until Frank was gone, then lowered his rifle. He looked at Ezra. "Get her out of here. Go somewhere he can't find you." "Why are you helping us?" "Because she's right. I'm tired of being the bad guy. Tired of doing Victor's dirty work. Maybe this one good thing will balance the scales a little." He looked at Abigail. "I'm sorry. For what we did. For what we tried to do." Abigail nodded. "Thank you. For this." Tommy helped his wounded companion to his feet. "We're heading south. You should go north. Put as much distance between you and Victor as possible. And ma'am, that inheritance, it's cursed. It's cost too many lives already. Don't let it cost yours." Then he was gone, supporting his wounded friend, disappearing into the forest. Ezra and Abigail were alone. "Can you walk?" Ezra asked. "I'll have to." They walked. Slow and painful, but they walked. North and east into territory even more remote, away from Frank and Victor and the inheritance that had brought nothing but death. As the sun set, they found another cave. Smaller than the last, barely big enough for two. But safe. Hidden. Theirs. Ezra built a small fire while Abigail rested. Her leg was swollen to twice its normal size, the bruising spectacular. But she could move, it could flex her foot. Not broken. That was something. "We can't keep running," she said quietly. "I know." "So what do we do?" Ezra poked at the fire, watching sparks rise. "We survive until winter. Snow closes the high passes in a month, maybe 6 weeks. Victor's men won't be able to reach us. Come spring, we figure out what's next. And if they find us before winter, they won't. You can't promise that." "No, I can't, but I can promise I won't let them take you. I'll die first." Abigail reached for his hand. "Don't say that. Don't even think it. I need you alive, Ezra. I need you." He turned to look at her. In the firelight she was beautiful, strong and fierce and perfect. "I need you too," he said. "More than I thought possible. 6 days ago I didn't know you existed. Now I can't imagine existing without you." Is that love or just survival? I think maybe they're the same thing. She pulled him close, kissed him. The kiss was different this time, not desperate or scared, certain, claiming. When they pulled apart, her eyes were dark with something that made his breath catch. "Ezra," she said softly, I don't know how to." He understood what she was asking, what she was offering. "Neither do I. Not really. Sarah was my only." "Then we'll learn together." "Are you sure, your vows?" "Were never final. I never took final vows. I was waiting, I think, for this, for you, for something that felt right." She cupped his face in her large hands. "This feels right." "Yes." What happened next was awkward and tender and real. Two people who'd been alone too long finding each other in the darkness, learning each other's bodies, each other's needs. Abigail was shy about her size, tried to make herself smaller. Ezra showed her she didn't need to, showed her that her strength was beautiful, that he loved her exactly as she was. Afterward they lay tangled together, breathing hard, scared and happy in equal measure. "I love you," Abigail whispered. "I know. I love you too." "What do we do now?" "We sleep. Tomorrow we keep surviving. That's all we can do." She curled against him, her head on his chest. Within minutes her breathing evened out. Sleep. Ezra stayed awake longer watching the fire die, thinking about Sarah, about the life he'd lost, about Abigail, about the life he might have found. The 2 rings around his neck pressed against his skin, a reminder, a question. Could he let go? Could he love again without betraying what came before Sarah's voice in his memory, gentle as always? "Live, Ezra. Don't waste what time you have." He closed his eyes and slept. The next week passed in a strange rhythm. Days spent hiding, nights spent together. They barely spoke about what had happened between them, but it changed everything. The way they moved around each other, the casual touches, the looks that said more than words. Abigail's leg healed slowly. The swelling went down. The bruises faded from purple to yellow to gone. Within 10 days she could walk without limping. They settled into the cave like it was a home. Ezra taught Abigail to hunt. She was a better shot than he'd expected, her strength allowing her to hold the rifle steady. They brought down a deer together, working as a team. Butchered it, smoked the meat, saved the hide. At night they talked. About everything and nothing. About their pasts and their fears and their hopes. About what might come next. "We can't stay here forever," Abigail said one night. "Winter's coming. We'll freeze without proper shelter." "I know. So what do we do?" Ezra had been thinking about this, about options and outcomes. "We go back, not to my cabin that's compromised, but to civilization, to a town. File a claim on your inheritance before your birthday. Make it legal. Once it's yours, Victor has no reason to kill you. He'll still be angry. Let him be angry. Anger isn't the same as having $500 to pay killers. Once the money's legally yours, he can't touch it, can't touch you. What about Frank? He knows we're alive. We'll deal with Frank when we have to. But first we need to establish your claim. How long until your birthday?" She counted on her fingers. 4 weeks, maybe less. Then we have time. We rest another week, let your leg fully heal. Then we head down. Find a town with a land office. File the claim. Get married if we have to satisfy the will's conditions. Abigail's head snapped up. Married. Ezra realized what he'd said, the assumption he'd made. His face went hot. "I mean, we don't have to. I just thought." Yes, I'll marry you, Ezra Blackwood, if you're asking." I'm asking poorly, but I'm asking." She smiled that rare full smile that made her beautiful. "Then yes, 1,000 times yes." They kissed, and it felt like a promise, like a beginning. But beginnings, Ezra knew, were fragile things, easily broken. And somewhere down the mountain Victor Thorne was plotting. Frank was hunting. Death was waiting. For now, though, they had this moment, this cave, each other. It would have to be enough. The descent took 3 days. 3 days of picking their way down trails that grew easier as the elevation dropped. 3 days of watching their backs, expecting Frank to appear at every turn. But the mountain remained quiet, empty except for them and the wind and the birds returning to the valleys for winter. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, they saw it. Silver Creek, a small town nestled in a valley, maybe 300 souls wood buildings scattered along a single main street. Smoke rose from chimneys. The sound of a blacksmith's hammer rang clear in the thin air. Civilization. Ezra stopped at the tree line, suddenly reluctant. 7 years since he'd walked into a town. 7 years since he'd faced people and their questions and their pity. Abigail's hand found his. "We don't have to do this." "Yes, we do. Your birthday is in 3 weeks. We need to file the claim." "I meant we don't have to do it together. I could go alone. You could wait here." He looked at her, at this woman who'd become his whole world in 2 weeks, who was offering him an escape from the thing he feared most: connection, community, being seen. "No," he said. "We do this together. I'm done hiding." They walked into town side by side, Ezra in his worn buckskins, looking like he'd crawled out of another century, Abigail in her torn black habit towering over him by 8 inches. They made quite a picture. People stopped what they were doing to stare. A woman herding children quickly pulled them inside. A man in front of the general store stepped back, hand going to his hip where a pistol likely rested. Fear and suspicion written on every face. "Where's the doctor?" Ezra called out. The man in front of the store pointed. "End of the street. Blue door. But Doc Miller don't treat Indians." Abigail flinched. Ezra felt rage rise in his chest, hot and immediate, but he swallowed it. Anger wouldn't help them now. "He'll treat a gunshot wound," Ezra said, "or answer to the law for letting someone die." They walked on, ignoring the stares and whispers that followed. Doc Miller was 70 if he was a day white-haired and stooped, with hands that shook slightly from age or drink or both. But his eyes were sharp when he examined Abigail's shoulder wound. 2 weeks old, you said?" "Yes, sir," Abigail answered. "Healing clean. Whoever stitched you knew what they were doing." He glanced at Ezra. "You, yes. Where'd you learn field medicine?" "The war and necessity." Doc Miller nodded understanding in his weathered face. He cleaned the wound again, applied fresh bandage. "Keep it dry. Change the dressing daily. You'll have a scar, but you'll live." "Thank you, doctor. What do we owe you?" $2. Ezra counted out coins from the small stash he'd brought from his cabin. Money he'd saved from selling furs years ago. Hadn't touched it in 7 years. Doc Miller took the coins, studied Ezra's face. "You're Blackwood, aren't you? The hermit up in the high country? Thought you were a ghost story. Mothers used to scare their children." "I'm real enough." "And her?" Doc Miller looked at Abigail. "She's real too. That habit says none, but those eyes say something else. She's real, and she's in trouble. Men are trying to kill her for an inheritance." Doc Miller's expression shifted. "Victor Thorne's niece. I heard rumors. Thought that was ghost story too." "You know Victor?" "Everyone knows Victor. Rich man, owns half the valley. Not a good man, but a powerful one. He looked at Abigail with something like sympathy. Your daddy was Jacob, wasn't he? Good man Jacob. Drank too much, but good underneath. Heard he passed last year. Yes, sir, Abigail said quietly. And he left you the land and money. The whole town knows about it. Will stated you had to claim it before your 28th birthday, or it goes to Victor. When's your birthday, child? 3 weeks from today. Doc Miller whistled low. Cutting it close. You'll need to see the lawyer. James Thornton. Office is across from the church. He's executor of your father's estate. Thank you, Doctor. As they turned to leave, Doc Miller spoke again. Word of advice. This town, it's not kind to difference. You're half Shoshone, he's a white hermit, and you're together. People will talk. Some will do more than talk. Watch your backs. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the street in shades of gold and shadow. They found the lawyer's office easily. A small building, neat and professional, with a sign reading James Thornton, attorney at law. The man who answered their knock was middle-aged, balding, with spectacles perched on his nose. He looked them over with the practiced eye of someone who'd seen everything and was surprised by nothing. Can I help you? I'm Abigail Thorne, Jacob Thorne's daughter. Thornton's eyebrows rose. I'll be damned. We'd heard rumors you were dead. Victor's been telling everyone his men found your body in the mountains. Victor's men tried to make that true, Ezra said. She's very much alive. I can see that. Come in, come in. The office was cluttered with papers and law books. Thornton cleared chairs for them, pulled out a thick file. Jacob's will. Simple enough on the surface, complicated underneath. You inherit 500 acres of prime valley land and $3,000 in the bank, but only if you claim it before your 28th birthday, and only if you're married or intend to marry within 30 days of claiming. Why the marriage requirement? Abigail asked. Your father wanted to make sure you were settled, protected. A woman alone especially, one with your, forgive me, unique situation would be vulnerable. A husband gives you legal protection. Ezra spoke up. We intend to marry. Thornton looked between them, saw something that made him nod. Then we can file the claim today. I'll need proof of identity. Do you have your baptismal certificate? Anything with your name and birth date? Abigail's face fell. No. Everything I had was in the wagon when we were attacked. The men burned it. That's a problem. Without proof of identity, Victor can contest the claim. Say you're an imposter. I'm not an imposter. I'm Jacob's daughter. I believe you, but we need proof. Someone who can testify to your identity. Someone the court will believe. Silence. Abigail had been gone 13 years. Who would remember her? Who would testify? Father Patrick, Thornton said suddenly. The priest at St. Mary's. He baptized you, didn't he? He'd remember. I don't know. I was an infant. Worth asking. Church records go back 50 years. If you're in there, we have our proof. They found Father Patrick in the church, an old stone building at the edge of town. The priest was ancient 80, at least bent with age, but sharp-eyed. He listened to their story, studied Abigail's face. Jacob Thorne's daughter, he murmured. Yes, I remember. You were a squalling thing, big even as a baby. Your mother was Shoshone, beautiful woman. Singing Bird, they called her. Jacob loved her desperately, though he had a poor way of showing it. You remember me. Child, I've baptized 300 babies in this valley. I remember the ones who were different. You were different. He shuffled to a cabinet, pulled out a leather-bound book. Parish records. Flipped through pages, found what he wanted. Here. Abigail Maria Thorne. Born September 15, 1848. Baptized September 22nd. Mother Singing Bird of the Shoshone. Father Jacob Thorne. Tears spilled down Abigail's cheeks. Proof. Finally proof that she existed, that she mattered. Father Patrick looked at her with kindness. You'll claim your inheritance. Yes, Father. Good. It's rightfully yours. Jacob wanted you to have it. Told me so before he died. Said he'd been a poor father, but at least he could give you security. The old priest paused. You're planning to marry this man? Yes, Father. Patrick looked at Ezra. You love her? with everything I am. And you," he turned to Abigail, "you love him." "Yes, Father, more than I thought possible." "Then I'll marry you, tomorrow if you like. No sense waiting when Victor's men might still be hunting." "Thank you, Father." That night they stayed at the town's small boarding house. The proprietress, a widow named Mrs. Henderson, looked at them with suspicion, but took their money readily enough. She gave them separate rooms, of course. Propriety demanded it. Ezra lay alone in his narrow bed staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow they'd file the claim. Tomorrow they'd marry. Tomorrow his life would change forever. A soft knock at the door. He opened it. Abigail stood in the hallway wearing a nightgown Mrs. Henderson had lent her. It was far too small, barely reaching her knees. "I couldn't sleep," she said. "Neither could I." "Can I come in?" He stepped aside. She entered, closed the door softly behind her. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Tomorrow everything becomes real, legal, permanent." "Are you having second thoughts?" "No, not about you, about me, about whether I deserve this, happiness, a life outside the convent, love." Ezra took her hands in his. They were so much larger than his, rough from work, strong enough to break him, and yet they trembled. "You deserve everything," he said. "Every bit of happiness this world can give. You've earned it with every day you survived, every day you kept going when it would have been easier to quit. You really believe that?" "I do." She kissed him then, deep and desperate. They made love quietly, conscious of thin walls and neighbors. Afterward she lay in his arms. "When we're married," she said softly, "what will we do? Where will we live?" "On your land. We'll build a house, start fresh, maybe raise some cattle, maybe plant crops, whatever we want. I've never had whatever I want before." "Then it's time you did." Morning came too soon. They dressed in the best clothes they had, which wasn't much. Ezra in a clean shirt borrowed from the boarding house. Abigail in a simple dress Mrs. Henderson had found, the only one large enough to fit. At the lawyer's office they filed the claim. Thornton witnessed and notarized the documents. Made copies for the land office, the bank, the county clerk. "It's done," he said. "The land and money are legally yours, Miss Thorne, or will be once you marry." "How long before Victor finds out?" "He probably knows already. Small town. Word travels fast." Thornton's expression was grave. "Watch yourself. Victor doesn't like losing, and this is a big loss." At 11 o'clock they stood before Father Patrick in the small church. No guests, no music, no flowers. Just them and the priest and God. "Dearly beloved," Father Patrick began. The words washed over Ezra. Words he'd heard before 7 years ago when he'd married Sarah. The same promises, the same vows, but different too, because he was different, older, scarred, aware of how fragile happiness was. "Do you, Ezra Blackwood, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." "And do you, Abigail Thorne, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Abigail's voice was strong and certain. "I do." "Then, by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Ezra stood on his toes. Abigail leaned down. Their lips met, and it felt like coming home. They signed the register. Father Patrick handed them a marriage certificate, legal proof of their union. "Go with God," he said, "and watch out for Victor. He's not done with you yet." They emerged from the church into bright autumn sunlight and found half the town waiting. Not a mob, not exactly, but not friendly either. 30, maybe 40 people standing in the street, staring, whispering. Among them Ezra recognized faces from yesterday, the man from the general store, Mrs. Henderson, others. And at the front, a woman in her 50s, well-dressed with a face like stone. She stepped forward. "So it's true," she said. "Jacob's half-breed daughter returned from the dead to steal what's rightfully Victor's." Abigail's hand tightened on Ezra's. "The land is mine by law. My father left it to me." "Your father was a drunk who married a savage. You have no right to land in this valley." Murmurs of agreement from some in the crowd, but not all. Ezra saw uncertainty on some faces, discomfort. "The law says different, Mrs. Crawford." Father Patrick's voice rang out. He'd followed them from the church. "The will is legal, the claim is filed, the marriage is witnessed. Abigail Blackwood is the rightful owner of that land, and no amount of prejudice changes that." Mrs. Crawford's face reddened. "Prejudice? I'm speaking common sense. Look at her. She's too big, too dark, too wrong for this town. And him." She gestured at Ezra. "A hermit who abandoned civilization for 7 years. What kind of man does that—" "A man who'd lost everything," Ezra said quietly. "A man who needed time to heal. But I'm here now, and I'm not leaving. We'll see about that." The crowd began to disperse, some with angry backward glances, others with thoughtful expressions. Mrs. Crawford left last, her spine rigid with disapproval. "Well," Abigail said when they were alone, "that went well?" Despite everything, Ezra laughed. "Could have been worse. At least no one threw anything. Yet." They walked to the bank, presented their papers, accessed Jacob's account. $3,000 in gold and notes. A fortune. More money than Ezra had seen in his entire life. "What do we buy first?" Abigail asked. "Supplies, tools, lumber, everything we need to build a house before winter." They spent the afternoon at the general store. The proprietor, a man named Hayes, was cold but professional. Took their money, loaded their supplies. When they mentioned building a house, he sneered. "Good luck finding anyone to help. No one's going to work for Victor's enemy." "I'll do it myself if I have to," Ezra said. "You—" Hayes looked him up and down. "You're half the size of your wife. How you going to raise walls and beams? By being twice as stubborn." That got a reluctant smile from Hayes. "You might at that." They rented a wagon, loaded their supplies. As they were finishing, a voice called out, "Need help with that." A young man approached, maybe 20, with an honest face and work-rough hands. "Name's Billy. I heard what you're doing, building on the Thorn land. I'd like to help." "We don't have much money to pay," Abigail said. "Don't want money, just want to do what's right. Your pa was kind to me when I was orphaned, gave my ma work cleaning his house. Least I can do is help his daughter." Ezra felt something crack in his chest. Kindness. He'd forgotten how it felt. "We'd be grateful for the help," he said. Billy grinned. "When do we start?" "Tomorrow. Sunrise." As they drove the wagon out of town toward the land that was now theirs, Abigail was quiet. "What are you thinking?" Ezra asked. "That maybe this could work. Maybe we could build something here, not just a house, a life." "We will. I promise." The land was beautiful. A flat meadow backed by pine forest with a creek running through and mountains rising in the distance. Jacob had chosen well. The soil was good. Water was plentiful. There was timber for building and game for hunting. They camped that first night under the stars. Ezra held Abigail close, thinking about the future, about the house they'd build, the children they might have, the life stretching ahead. "I love you," he said. "I love you too." And for the first time in 7 years, Ezra believed that love was enough. The next weeks were a blur of work. Billy proved invaluable, strong and skilled and tireless. Others came too drawn by curiosity or conscience or boredom. Doc Miller donated timber from his land. Widow Jensen brought nails and tools her late husband had left. Even Hayes from the general store contributed roofing tiles grudgingly. One by one, people helped. Not everyone. Mrs. Crawford and her circle stayed away, spreading poison about the half-breed and her hermit husband. But enough people helped that the house began to rise. Walls went up, a roof went on, windows were fitted, a stone fireplace built. It was small, just 3 rooms, but it was theirs. Home. 5 months after the wedding, Abigail announced she was pregnant. Ezra's first reaction was terror. Memories of Sarah, of blood and death and loss. But Abigail's joy was infectious, and Doc Miller was confident. "She's strong," he said. "Stronger than any woman I've seen. She'll be fine." The pregnancy was difficult. Abigail was sick for months. The baby was large, growing fast. But she never complained, just kept working, kept living, kept loving. In late spring 1877, her water broke. Ezra sent Billy for Doc Miller, then stayed by her side, held her hand through the contractions, whispered encouragement, prayed to a God he wasn't sure he believed in. Labor lasted 14 hours. 14 hours of pain and fear and determination, and then finally a cry. A son, healthy, perfect 9 pounds, dark hair like his mother, strong like his mother. But Ezra's eyes. Doc Miller placed the baby in Ezra's arms, the weight of him, the reality of him, alive and crying and beautiful. "You did it," Ezra said to Abigail, tears streaming down his face. "You did it." She smiled, exhausted but radiant. "We did it." They named him Daniel, after no one in particular, just a name that meant, "God is my judge," a reminder that judgment came from higher powers than Mrs. Crawford and her circle. That night Ezra sat alone outside while Abigail and Daniel slept. He took the leather cord from around his neck, the one with Sarah's ring and his old wedding band, held them in his palm. "Thank you," he whispered to Sarah's memory. "Thank you for the year we had. Thank you for teaching me how to love. I'll never forget you. But I have a new family now, a new life, and I need to let you rest." He walked to the pine tree near the house, dug a small hole at its base, placed the rings inside, covered them with earth. "Goodbye, Sarah." It felt like releasing a breath he'd held for 7 years. The years passed. Daniel grew strong and clever. 2 years later, a daughter came. They named her Emma, after no one, just because Abigail liked the sound. Then twin boys 3 years after that. The house grew too small. They added rooms, then built a barn, bought cattle, planted crops. The land prospered, and slowly the town accepted them. Not everyone. Mrs. Crawford went to her grave disapproving, but her children were kinder. Her grandchildren played with Daniel and Emma and didn't see color or size or difference. Just friends. Abigail started teaching. First just her own children, then others. Parents who wanted their children to read and write brought them to the Blackwood House. Within 5 years they'd built a proper schoolhouse. Within 10 it was the only school for 50 miles. Ezra helped where he could, hunted to provide meat for families who couldn't afford it, trapped in winter, built furniture and tools, became a part of the community he'd fled 7 years before. And always at the center of everything was Abigail. Teaching, loving, building. Too big and too strong and too much woman for anyone except Ezra, who'd loved her from the moment he saw her tied to that tree. 30 years passed. Ezra woke one morning in 1906 and knew something was wrong. His chest felt tight. His left arm ached. He tried to sit up and couldn't. Abigail, he managed. She was beside him instantly. 57 years old now, her hair streaked with gray, her face lined with age and laughter, still beautiful, still his. "What is it?" "My heart, I think this is it." "No, don't you dare. Don't you leave me." But they both knew. 69 years was a good run, longer than he'd expected back in those dark days after Sarah died. Doc Miller came, confirmed what they knew. Hours, maybe a day. Daniel came with his wife and 3 children. Emma came with her husband and 2 daughters. The twins came both ranchers, now both married with families. The house filled with people, with life. Ezra drifted in and out. At one point he opened his eyes to find Abigail beside him holding his hand. "I got to live," he whispered, "because of you. Thank you. We lived. Together. That's all that mattered." "The rings, Sarah's rings, are they still under the tree?" "Yes." "Good. Let them stay. Let her rest. You're my wife. You're my love. You're everything." Tears spilled down her weathered cheeks. "I love you, Ezra Blackwood. I love you, Abigail Blackwood." He closed his eyes, took one more breath, and was gone. They buried him on the hill behind the house, under the pine trees he'd planted 30 years before. The whole town came, even those who'd once disapproved, because in the end he'd proved himself, had become one of them, had earned his place. Abigail lived another 10 years, kept teaching, kept the school running, kept the memory of Ezra alive in everything she did. When she died in 1916 at 68, they buried her beside him, under those same pines, together in death as they'd been in life. The school continued. Thorn Academy, they called it, named for Abigail. Over the years, hundreds of children learned to read and write within its walls, learned that being different wasn't being wrong, that love could cross any divide, that size and color and background mattered less than character. Their great-grandchildren still live in Silver Creek, still tell the story of the mountain man and the giant nun, of how two people both running from pain found each other in the wilderness, found love, found home. On the wall of Thorn Academy hangs a plaque. Founded by Abigail Blackwood, 1876. Who taught us that being different is not being wrong, and that love makes us all the right size. This is their story. The mountain man who learned to live again, and the giant nun who learned she was never too big for love. They saved each other, and in doing so, they built something that outlasted them both. A family, a community, a legacy, the kind of legacy that echoes through generations, that changes lives, that proves again and again that love is stronger than fear, that acceptance is more powerful than prejudice, that two broken people can heal each other and build something beautiful from the pieces. Silver Creek still stands, the school still teaches, the land still prospers, and under the pine trees on the hill, two graves sit side by side. The markers are simple. Ezra Blackwood, 1837 to 1906, beloved husband, father friend. Abigail Blackwood, 1848 to 1916, beloved wife, mother teacher. Visitors sometimes leave flowers, sometimes just stand in silence reading the words, feeling the weight of a story well lived. And if you listen carefully on quiet evenings when the wind moves through those old pines, you can almost hear them. Ezra's quiet voice, Abigail's gentle laugh, the sound of two people who found each other against all odds and refused to let go. Their story ended long ago. But the love they built, the life they created, the lessons they taught, those continue. In every child who learns to read at Thorn Academy, in every person who chooses love over fear, in every soul who believes that being different makes you special, not wrong. That's the true legacy, not land or money or buildings, but the simple truth that love, real love, the kind that sees you and accepts you and cherishes you exactly as you are, that love changes everything. It changed Ezra, brought him back from the dead inside to the living. It changed Abigail, showed her she was never too much, just exactly enough. And it changed everyone who knew them, who saw proof that the impossible was possible, that the unlikely was beautiful, that two people could be so different and yet so perfectly matched. This is the story of how a mountain man saved a giant nun, and how she saved him right back, and how together they saved each other. Forever. The end.